Morning, everyone. Thank you very much for coming in on this session, which looks at India's travel and tourism sector and the competitive advantages or the lack of it that we may have. There are perhaps two ways to look at where we stand today when it comes to the travel and tourism sector. One is that we've risen 12 places in the competitive index when we compare it to other countries in the world. The other is we are still way behind the curve. So it is the classic Indian 50-50 story. Is the glass half full or is the glass half empty? And that's what I'm going to pose to my guests who join me on this special session. Let me introduce them. I want to start with you, Vishnu Menon, co-founder and chief executive officer of wandertrails.com. It's a venture-funded travel startup making experiential travel accessible to thousands of explorers across the world, and particularly coming into India. My other guest is Ajay Singh, chairman and managing director of SpiceJet India, who's widely credited for turning around the airline and is someone who therefore has a unique perspective on what needs to be done to move to the next level. Also joining me is Craig Smith, president and managing director, Asia Pacific at Marriott International, and someone whose hotel chain is spreading across this country as well. Thank you very much for joining us. And my final guest is, last but not the least, is Amitabh Kant, Chief Executive Officer, Niti Aayog, India, and in his various previous avatars, has also been the author of Branding India as Incredible India, and of course in his home IAS state of Branding Kerala very successfully as God's own country. Therefore, I'm going to start with you, Mr. Kant, which is the specific issue of the branding of India today. Because the way one would like, or the objective of the government is to increase, to double the number of people coming into India over the next 10 years. We would like, I believe one figure suggests that we are looking at about 20 million tourists coming in by 2025. How do you believe India needs to be branded to make it that kind of attractive destination where tourism doubles in the next decade?
Rajdeep, I'm not a great believer in the numbers game, and I don't believe that tourism in India should be a mass tourism. India should be a mass tourism destination. I'm a great believer in values. What India should really aim at is that in the next 5 years, it should increase its total earnings from tourism at least minimum 3x. That's very much doable. That's possible if India, and we must understand this, that India is a long-haul tourism destination. 98.1% of our traffic comes by air. People who come here stay for a long period. According to World Tourism Organization, the people who come here spend 18 to 21 days. And therefore, we need several things. One is we need to get 5 states of India who will make tourism their number one priority. India is dying out for jobs. India wants growth with jobs. And the industry has not been able to tell politicians, you want jobs, go for tourism. This is the sector which has a huge multiplier impact. It will create many more jobs than what industry and any other sector can ever do. And I think what the industry must tell, that you create 5 states, focus on 5 states of India, focus on 5 integrated circuits of India, focus on 5 destinations of India, make them world-class, create a seamless experience from the point of arrival to the point of departure, and then go for, you see, my view is that a brand is what a brand does. You can't start doing branding of India without creating a great product on ground. And secondly, my view is that you need to create great experiences, but India needs to become a great MICE destination. Meetings, incentives, conventions, exhibitions are the big game. We've been able to create hotels, but you need to convert India into a 365 days a year destination. You push for MICE. India needs 100 more conventions destinations. If you create 100 large-scale convention and exhibition centers in India, India's tourism will be 365 days a year. You would have created circuits, you would have created experiences. Then push for branding. And India will succeed. You can't do branding without a great product, and India must create great products. And the way to create products is to tell politicians and bureaucrats in India, if you want to create jobs in India, tourism is your answer, and your only answer in a quick, fast way.
You know, I always like starting off with you because you energize the audience. And as a former, and as a former bureaucrat, I hope you, or still a bureaucrat in a way, I hope you energize your fellow bureaucrats and politicians to think like you do.
Well, you know, the private sector has to do that.
Oh, I see. So you're going to provide the broad framework, and then you're going to ask them to do the dirty work of actually setting up the infrastructure.
The problem is they speak in too many voices, you know. So there's a tour operator, there's a travel agent. They must have a very simple equation. We want to create 3 million jobs. This is what you need to do. Tuck.
Okay, I'm going to come to that in a moment, and particularly, you know, what is actually required to build that great product? Where are the roadblocks in building the great product? And then we can again come back to branding.
Sure.
But Craig, do you agree with a lot of what Amitabh seems to suggest, which is that in this country, at the moment, we just haven't fulfilled our tourism potential? We're what? You know, tourism put together about 3% of GDP when it should easily be double. And providing the kind of jobs which Mr. Kant says, you know, will multiply in a service sector like tourism. Where do you find the fault? Is it with the government, with the likes of Mr. Kant's colleagues and his bosses? Is it that the political class of this country has let down tourism, has never seen it as a number one priority sector?
So this is pretty scary, but the private and the public sector today in our conversations actually have more in common than we normally do. And so it kind of worries me. I think maybe I'm wrong, but I actually agree with most of what you said today. We are, as a company, we're huge. We're 6,000 hotels. We're growing. We're all over the world. Imagine the size of our company. We have 100 hotels. We'll finish the year with over 100 hotels in India. Every time I see Mr. Marriott, he asks me, why aren't you growing faster in India? We as a company are bullish about India, maybe more bullish than India is. I agree. I'm a glass half full person. I think that India, we could lay blame, and we could spend a lot of time saying what went wrong, private, public, and we're probably both to blame. But the truth of the matter is the upside's phenomenal. How many jobs will that create? What's the residual impact of that money flowing? Most people, most politicians actually, don't think about the fact that every time a tourist comes into this country and spends $1, that's an export. They're bringing foreign currency into your country for a local good or a local service. That's an export. And it's creating jobs. And it's creating jobs at the right place. It's not creating jobs at just the high skill levels. It's creating jobs at every single venue. But the government's done a great job. I mean, what we've seen over the past, and I kid around with that with my team. I say it's incredible India, and it's also impatient India. Indians are very impatient. But over the last 15 years that I've been working in India, the changes have been phenomenal. I remember my first visit to India and staying at the Hyderabad airport. There was nothing to eat. I couldn't use the bathroom. I'd die if I'd gone in there. And there were mosquitoes the size of pterodactyls flying all around. And I look at the airport today and I go, wow. I mean, what great changes we've seen in India, but there's more work to be done. And the first thing that needs to happen is it needs to be prioritized. There needs to be some sort of union between the public and the private sector. Call it a board, call it a working group, whatever. But we need to work together to figure out and come up with a plan and stimulus. What I do agree with, and continue to agree with, you need to pick 4 or 5 destinations and make these the hubs. Make these examples.
I'm going to ask you by the end, which are those 4 or 5 destinations you would pick if you had a choice, since we've sort of kicked that off with Mr. Khan. But let me get a view from someone who sort of, in a way, has to deal with it on a day-to-day basis here in India. Vishnu, as someone who's trying to sort of encourage people to experience these new travel destinations, to promote heritage tourism, which the President of India last week said was an important element in sort of attracting tourists to India, what is the real experience? You know, how do you connect the various, how do you achieve last mile connectivity in a large and diverse country like India? How do you actually do that? Is it as simple as it is sitting here? Where are the roadblocks?
No, there are quite a lot of roadblocks actually. It's first of all a very, very fragmented industry. When you look at experiential travel itself, I mean, if you go down onto the ground, you talk about creating products. I mean, Amitabh is absolutely right. Before you brand, you need products. How do you go about creating products, right? There are existing hotel brands, but we already know that it's a supply constrained market. It's supply choked in destinations which are prominent. And then you need to create more supply in new destinations that we're talking about. Absolutely, you pick up 3, you pick up 4, pick up 5, but you want to create airports, you want to create hotels. That's a 4 to 5 year gestation period minimum. So you want to kickstart the development of these destinations off much earlier. And the only way that can happen is by encouraging more micro entrepreneurs to come through. So one of our endeavors at Montreals has been, how do you open up new homes? How do we ensure that holiday homes of probably NRIs are converted into vacation rentals and then lent out to people? More than that, the activities in a destination, right? It's what you do in a destination that makes it truly incredible. And I think from a branding perspective, you're very backward in that. A lot of people still think about Taj Mahal or rafting in Rishikesh. And there are a few of these hand-picked activities. But the likes of what you talked about, be it a heritage tour, or we have fantastic river cruises in Brahmaputra where you can see the Gangetic dolphins. It's India's aquatic animal, national aquatic animal, right? Or you can go on tribal tours with the Irla tribe in Nilgiris. You can spend a day with the tribe, you can spend a day with the tribal king.
But how many quality hotels are there along the Ganga? Let's be clear. What is the level of connectivity to reaching one of these wonderful sites along the river? So there is that last mile connectivity, presumably.
It's a big challenge. And so it's easier for a lot of domestic tourists to actually travel from hub destinations, what I call as Delhi, Bangalore, Bombay. These are hubs and people prefer to go away on weekend getaways. For a foreign traveler, what we do is almost do design, holiday design. Like 8-12 days, tailor it to the last mile so that we know there are qualified cab drivers who are trained in their etiquettes, who can talk to them properly and take them through the entire craft. Because to be honest, we found that foreign tourists does have some apprehension while they travel into India, especially when they're not relying on a big brands like a Marriott or a Taj to stay in. A lot of these places do not have that kind of infrastructure. So you need to put yourself up in a boutique resort or a homestay. So you need products and brands from a travel agency perspective, from travel platforms perspective, which foreign inbound travelers can trust.
Okay, I'll come to more specifics in a moment. But Ajay, one of the challenges is also to make this the largest aviation market by 2030, which is again one of the goals which is being thrown up. And one wonders the gap between this dream and the reality. Is it that even the aviation sector plays safe today, is not ambitious enough to explore possibly new areas where you could go? You're looking to go to Goa. You want to increase the number of flights to Goa. Would you, for example, set up a flight to Hampi, which is again a wonderful heritage site? But when I had to reach Hampi, I had to travel all the way from Bangalore to reach Hampi. So is the aviation sector ambitious enough to realize what is the potential?
I think the aviation sector is one of the most vibrant sectors you will find anywhere in the world. It is the fastest growing aviation market in the world. India today is growing at 20%, is the fastest growing in the world. With schemes like Udaan, what we have done is that we have expanded the reach of flights to airports where no flights existed before. So 70 years after independence, we had 75 airports which were functional in India. In just the last 1 year, we put 30 more airports on the map through the Udaan scheme. There's Udaan Phase 2, which is going to happen, which will put many, many more airports on the map. SpiceJet has started flying, for the first time to airports like Puducherry. Can you imagine there was no flight to Puducherry? It's such a beautiful place. We talk of Goa. I'm sure you've been, but many people here should go and really see that place. It's beautiful. We've started, look at a place like Agra. Today, that is our #1 tourist destination in the country. We have not one single flight into Agra. So we need to make that happen. And we will make it happen through Udaan. But we also need to start thinking out of the box. We need to start looking at even places where no airports exist today. SpiceJet is now considering a project where we use seaplanes for the first time in India. Now, there are no regulations which exist for seaplanes. There is no infrastructure for seaplanes, but we believe that if you really need to get to tourist destinations where there is nothing, no airport infrastructure which exists, you need to start thinking out of the box and find a business model which works with other kinds of air travel. So there is no shortage of ambition here. Indian Airlines have placed orders which are the largest orders ever placed by any country in the history of aviation. So no shortage of ambition, but there's lots and lots for us to do. We cannot have the most expensive aviation sector in the world, the most expensive aviation turbine fuel in the world, the most expensive airports in the world, because there was this socialist mindset that flying was for the rich, everything needed to be taxed. Now we've added to that by putting GST, which is really large tax on all sorts of activities related to aviation. I think those kind of issues need to be fixed. We need to be globally competitive, and if we can be globally competitive in terms of cost and taxation infrastructure, there's no reason why India, for the foreseeable future and perhaps the next decade, will not be the fastest growing aviation market in the world.
GST. You know, a number of people from the tourism and travel sector are angry about GST, and 28% for hotel rooms over 7,500, and a belief that far from incentivizing people to enter the aviation and the hotel sector, you've actually disincentivized people. Is this going to be one of the changes, one of the reforms that we expect in the next 24 hours? You can give us a headline that the government has decided 28% too high.
Well, I don't want to give any headlines. You'll put me into deep trouble. But, I mean, Rajiv, the mindset in India is, we've created two sets of GSTs, up to 7,500.
Yeah.
Up to 7,500, which is at a much lower rate, and beyond 7,500. So many of us in India see tourism, travel and tourism as a luxury and not as a job creator. I mean, my whole emphasis is that the industry's got to say that I'm going to create 5 million jobs in India. And for this, you need to do this. And this is the only sector which can create jobs in the quick run. No other sector can do that for you, for this country. And therefore, you need to do the following. That's number one. Number two, you've made great airports in this country. Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, Hyderabad, great Chennai, Calcutta, all great airports. We need to convert them into global hubs. I mean, look at Jet flying to Dubai. Why? Why not Delhi, Mumbai? These are Indian hubs. We must convert them into global hubs. Without that, it will not happen. Number three, mark my word for this. You want tourism to grow exponentially in terms of earnings? It will not happen till India doesn't become a great MICE market. MICE is what gives you 365 days a year. Fourth, it will not happen till 10 chief ministers don't realize that this is the sector which is going to give them jobs and growth. It's happened. Look at us, a country like India, bigger than 24 countries of Europe. How many states are selling tourism? Kerala, Rajasthan, Gujarat, that's all. What about others? Tourism is the sector which is going to make the states grow. The industry must be able to tell the politicians that you want growth, you want prosperity, you want jobs, which is the number one priority of all politicians. This is the sector which will deliver.
How did you get a socialist mindset-driven state like Kerala to buy into your thing? I've often wondered. Kerala, most people believe, was the worst place to do business. But you got God's own country right there. What did you tell the Kerala left politicians to convince them that this was the place to be?
One simple thing. I got a tourism satellite account done by the Tata Consultancy Service. It was the first tourism satellite account ever done to say that it has a 10x multiplier impact on jobs than any other sector. The politician, the communists who never believe in God, bought that line of God's own country, went for it, and it created jobs for them. Second, the world of tourism works on being The only way it'll work is differentiate yourself. There are 180 destinations vying for tourists. Differentiate yourself from the rest of the world. What we did with Kerala is we went back to the roots of Kerala. We created every single product of Kerala, which was different. We went back to traditional Kerala martial art. We went back to traditional Kerala cuisine. We went back to traditional Kerala art forms. We created new products of backwater, houseboats. We brought Ayurveda center stage. And we said Kerala is an antithesis of the Western world. It is a stress buster. And you want to relax. There's no other destination other than Kerala. And the world was then moving away from sun, sand, and sea, what was then known as Triple S, into experiential tourism, and the world bought that line.
You know, when you retire, you should put on your CV, your biggest credit should be that you taught the left to believe in God. And that in itself is a magical thing to do. But what is that differentiator, Craig? If you were to look for a differentiator for the Indian market, what would that be? Since Amitabh is saying, in the context of Kerala, important to sell it as a stress buster. Look at Ayurveda, look at traditional, and make it a place where you could come and, you know, have your traditional Indian Ayurveda massages, apart from the lovely backwaters. What is it that you would like to see India do? Is it the MICE concept, more convention centers, or is it heritage? What is that key differentiator, Craig?
Let me start off by saying that, you know, countries like companies compete. You compete for capital and you compete for customers. And countries don't see themselves as having to compete. And today, capital and customers are more fluid than ever. The people want experiences. They want to go. Today, they're paying more for experiences than they are product. We spent a week in July with the head economist from Visa, and there's more money. The curve for experiences is going up much faster than it is for product. And so if you think that you're competing, you look at the government, you look at India, and you think, great things have happened. E-Visa, phenomenal. It's one of the most incredible things that's happened. But on the other side of that, GST, good. 28%, bad. If you want a headline, that's it. GST is good. The objective behind GST is good, but 28% is bad. What happens? It's twice anywhere in the world. So could you imagine if I raised my rates of my hotel twice overnight, where would the customers go? They'd go to the competition. And the same thing is going to happen. In India is very, very expensive to build a hotel. That's why there aren't enough hotels. And we can talk about tourism, but if there's no place for them to stay, or it costs so much money to stay here because it's expensive. Cost of land's expensive, cost of capital is expensive, and it takes forever to build a hotel because of the permits. And you add all those together, now you're adding GST at 28% on top of it. You're a builder of a hotel, you have capital, maybe I'll build an office building, maybe I'll build an apartment building, I'll do something else. And so the government's got to go back and say, is this the right thing? GST, yes, it's good. 28%, very, very wrong. You want to compete. You have to compete by looking outside and saying, what are other countries charging for GST? What do they charge for capital? What are we doing to make it easier for a tourist to come here? And then ask yourself, are we doing that? Otherwise, this is all rhetoric at the end of the day.
You know, that's my worry. It is all rhetoric. And, you know, the fear, let me give you a simple example. Experiential travel, let's say through Bihar, for those coming in from Southeast Asia who want to go down the Buddhist trail, go to Gaya and places which have a strong link with Buddha. But you're in a state which has an alcohol ban today. You want to go to the Gir Lion Sanctuary to see the last great Asiatic lion, the state of the Prime Minister, Chief Minister of that state for more than a decade. Total prohibition. Maharashtra, beef ban. Do you believe all of that in a way are all impediments? That, I mean, if Bihar wants to attract tourists, and you know that could be a potential state to generate jobs, since that's an issue, should the alcohol ban be lifted? Should Maharashtra review the beef ban, or are there cultural practices?
Think of Dubai. They don't believe in drinking. They don't believe in pork. You can buy pork in a store. You can buy alcohol.
You should set your priorities right, like what Amitabh mentioned. It's not that you're changing your people or the culture that you are following, right? You're catering and making sure that from the point of arrival to the point of departure, the experience of the guest is phenomenal, right? And for that, part of it is that you embrace the local culture and you embrace the local tradition. But at the same time, you do not create big roadblocks or big bottlenecks that will prevent them from even coming in. And if it is relaxation, they might want to have a drink, or two. I mean, it's not a
You know,
big
that's precisely it, Mr. Khan. It will be seen as rhetoric, a lot of what you're saying. If, let's say, the Bihar government, doesn't lift the ban on alcohol, or the Maharashtra government sticks to its, policies on beef ban. I mean, do you believe that, the state governments have failed to realize what a Dubai perhaps did so brilliantly is that, at the end of the day, I need my tourists, I have my local traditions, but I will give the tourist every facility he needs to live the life that he
Yeah.
wants or she wants.
So, Rajdeep, I've been a long-term believer in a couple of things. One is that tourism is essentially civilizational in character. You can't have garbage and filth and say that we have great heritage sites. So, India, first of all, must focus on cleanliness, number one. Number two, it's about seamless experiences around. Indian states can't get into what a tourist wants to eat and drink. It's just not possible. I mean, a tourist what he wants to eat and drink is his individual business, not the state's business.
Have you told that to the political leadership?
No, I've said it all the time that for a tourist, number three, India can have the greatest heritage sites, but it's about creating experiences. And the tourists can go and have all the greatest experiences through the day, but evening he wants to relax and he wants to chill out. And therefore, you need to create that evening experience for him in terms of Indian culture, whatever you want to do. But you need to create that. And it's very important that states work around this with private sector. Fourthly, tourism is essentially a private sector play. Every single person you come across, from the tour operator to the guide to the taxi driver, it's all basically a private sector play. The state is the destination manager, but there's a private sector play. And you need to create that seamless experience right from the point a person comes till the point he goes. And you need to build that through a vast range of tourism products.
It's interesting you say that because Ajay, you work partly at least with the government and then more fully with the private sector. Is there any notion of a public-private partnership that exists in this tourism sector? Does everyone work in their little silos, or is it still state knows best? They will still decide how this sector is going to expand, which is part of the problem. Are they willing to unleash the energies of the private sector in tourism?
No, unfortunately, you're right. I think the divide really is that the public sector, and when you speak to bureaucrats, and of course there are huge notable exceptions like Mr. Kant, the public sector doesn't seem to understand profit, business, private sector. It's still looked upon with suspicion.
Even today?
Even today. We see this in the GST discussions. You go and speak to the bureaucrats. It seems that, either they don't understand or that they have other priorities. For them, there are 20 other things that they are thinking about. They are not looking at it in a sectoral sense. But I think one model that could work for us is to say that, look, let's pick these 10 places which we want to develop as tourist sites. And let us all work together on those 10 places to ensure that everything works seamlessly in those 10 places. The airport will be perfect. There will be flights into those airports. Clearances for building hotels, budget hotels, all sorts of staying facilities. Those clearances will be given quickly. There will be a mechanism to sort out whatever problems exist. There will be proper taxi rides which you'll get. There'll be a foreign exchange center. The whole piece works seamlessly. There will be, whatever local laws of the sort that you were referring to will be sort of diluted for those 10 areas. We need to get
special tourism zones in a way.
Special tourism zones, and this is a model I think that we can try and follow in India, and with the private sector, the public sector, the state government and the central government working together. You just need a few committed chief ministers and the private sector participants.
You've got a chief minister of India's most populous state who has forgotten to put the Taj in his promotional material. I just wonder, what kind of message that sends out. My worry is that there is still a huge gap between the chief ministers, and tourism for many of them is seen as a luxury sector.
No,
They still don't
absolutely.
seem
And-
to
and-
understand that it
and-
actually benefits that last mile, the last man out there.
Absolutely, and I think this case needs to be made. As Amitabh was saying, we need to make this case in a language that will be understood by politicians, and we have to be sensitive to the priorities of the political class as well. And if their priorities is to create employment, we need to rejig our discussion and our argument, and to show to them the benefit that it's going to do for them and for their states in terms of creating jobs. I think if we can rephrase the argument in that sense, a lot of politicians will play ball, because who the hell doesn't need jobs in their states?
So you're saying basically reframe the entire tourism debate away from seeing it as some kind of a exclusive luxury sector to saying it's basically about jobs.
And we've done that in the aviation sector. If you look at the aviation sector for years, this is something which has been a luxury good. And that still, in the minds of some bureaucrats, that still exists. That notion that this is about, flying is for the rich. But today, you have all sorts of people flying. You have the middle class flying, you have lower middle class flying. This is basic connectivity that you're providing to places, airports, states which had no connectivity, and it's a huge multiplier. Much as tourism is a huge multiplier, aviation has been a huge multiplier for states, and I think state chief ministers have started to understand.
Basically you've got to go and tell Yogi Adityanath what you told the Kerala government. You've got to go there and tell him, or you've got to go and tell a Nitish Kumar in Bihar. Or you've got to tell the Maharashtra chief minister, wake up guys and smell the coffee.
Yeah,
I mean, the fact that it took us so many years to have a proper airport at Agra, which is still not being fully used, I mean, what does that say about us 70 years after independence?
But Rajdeep, let me give credit where it's due. Kerala is also a product of great enterprise. It's a product of great local entrepreneurship. It's not a product of five-star resorts. It's a product of local entrepreneurs creating some of the most beautiful, most exotic resorts possible. And they've been the Kerala is a product of very vibrant private sector. I don't see that vibrancy in other states. Unless and until the private sector must be vibrant, live, and energetic. They must create the products and go and then fight it out.
Are you saying UP and Bihar don't have vibrant private entrepreneurs?
Well, Mr. Ajay Singh has to do that job.
You're asking, okay, yes.
Yeah, I would say that.
I mean, is there a north-south divide?
No, but
is there a
there's-
divide within this country?
there's a great-
East-west, north-south?
No, it's not, but I think there's some great points brought up here. Is you have to look at everyone has different motivations. And unless we focus on what their motivation is, this won't move. It'll continue to be rhetoric. And so how do you frame it up for the government? How do you frame it up for the private sector? How do you frame it for the public? So for the public, we need to convince them that tourism isn't bad. It's not luxury. We're actually creating. So if you think of it, it's three aspects. It creates jobs. That's great. It creates tax revenue. Tax revenue. I mean, Cancun, Mexico. Mexican government has the biggest place for tax revenue comes out because of all those Americans, and it creates exports. Americans fly in. They buy Mexican goods, stay in Mexican hotels. It creates an export. And if you can convince and frame that argument up, everybody's now on board. And then now you've got them on board with a motivation. Now you've got to create a clean framework, because the worry is in India. Sorry, the worry is in India. We talked about this before. I watch Indian news. There's 15 guys all talking on top of each other at the same time, right?
That's
And they're-
Rajdeep's responsibility.
Yeah,
No,
and
I'm not at all.
You do.
No, hold on.
So,
hold on. I can't be targeted for what I didn't do.
Yeah. So
But
one
go
thing,
ahead.
as an outsider, one thing I would say is there's not a shortage of ideas in India. The shortage is bringing that down to few ideas and executing on them, because we can't make everybody happy.
Is
Focus
the
on
one that
5.
Ajay floated an idea that you have 10 special tourism zones in this country?
I say
And
5.
put all your energy. You're saying 5.
I'm saying 5.
Put 5. Which would those 5 be?
So Rajdeep,
I go first. I'll
yeah,
pick one. And
yeah,
then,
yeah,
so
5.
I say Jaipur.
That's 1.
Yeah, I'd say the Golden Triangle. Everyone knows about it in the world. What you want to do is, in business school, they talked about core competencies and then adjacencies to it. So in other words, start with what you're good at, what your people already know, build on that, and then go outside. Jaipur is an easy one.
Jaipur's an easy one. Let's look at 5.
I would say places around Karnataka, because it gets a lot of international tourists as such into Bangalore for work. but they don't necessarily embrace the culture of Karnataka.
It's the
Otherwise,
most
you have
beautiful state I've driven through.
Hampi, Coorg, Chikmagalur, Sakleshpur, Gokarna is a fantastic location. It trumps over any day.
Sure.
Right? So there are so many places that
I
you
won't
can
agree
go
with
there.
that being a Goan, but I will get, Gokarna is okay, but it's lovely. They, you know, there are lovely, but, so you're saying Karnataka? Okay, so you need a campaign for Karnataka, go ahead.
No, I think we should look at the Northeast. For the reason that, government
But it's so badly connected.
it's so badly connected today. But if you start to develop it, there is a huge amount of capital that's available with the government of India, ministries like donor. You can get all these guys involved and start to build. There are some incredibly beautiful places.
Would you
in the
increase your
Northeast.
number of flights to the
Absolutely.
Northeast as a result? Because traditionally airlines have been reluctant to go there.
No, absolutely. In fact,
Arunachal Pradesh, I have to take a chopper.
no, we've tripled our flights into Assam, which is we are using Guwahati as a base. And you're completely right. Arunachal, Tawang, look at the place. I mean, it's more beautiful than Switzerland probably is. But there is absolutely zero infrastructure. There's no connectivity. There is no infrastructure. You need to start
That's a
building that out.
long-term project.
It is a long-term project. Of course, it's a long-term project. But at least, it's virgin territory. There's lots of money. Government is really keen to do it. I think we can put everybody together and
Okay,
start.
so we've got Northeast, Karnataka, Jaipur. Let me give you one that you would start with.
Northeast is about sustainability. It's about carrying capacity. We need to be extremely careful about Northeast, not to convert it into a mass destination. We'll destroy it by mass tourism. The state for me is Karnataka. This is the state which has incredible products. It has wildlife, it has beaches, it has a coastline, and it has the greatest heritage sites India's ever seen.
No, but
the
you know,
most unexplored.
To
the
go
most
to a
underwater.
Gokarna,
Yeah.
I have to either go to Goa and drive down,
Yeah.
or I have to go to a Mangalore possibly and drive down. I mean, both more than 4 hours. So, I mean, you've got to create then those small feeder airports, presumably.
So
at least.
my view is that Karnataka has the possibility and the potential to be the greatest tourism destination in the world. I mean, the heritage sites are unbeatable. The beach is beautiful. It has backwaters, which only Kerala has, and it has wildlife and all in close proximity, 3 hours of each other. No other state has the potential to dramatically change its fortunes in the world of travel and tourism as Karnataka.
And they've
has.
just tripled the tax on small aircraft fuel.
I think there's
There's
two big,
actually a
two
place
big
which
misses.
Let me just open it to the audience, and then I'll get you all to make more comments on it. But I agree with Karnataka. It's a state which I have found the most wonderful to travel through. Let me open it up to people and get in comments. Is there a mic that can be given? Yes. Just raise your hands and do introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Sneh. I am a global chauffeur from Ahmedabad. I come from the first World Heritage City of India. But living in Ahmedabad, I feel that the destinations, the heritage sites, the places where actually tourists they feel like to go are not taken care of. Like it's in a very decent past that they have been prepped because the applications were made and the first application was rejected because the application was also not.
Your question?
My question is that so the government's agenda of the power, the quest for the power comes in between the growth of a lot of things. Gujarat is, I think, the best destination in India to cultivate the tourism. There is a coastal line, there is Saurashtra, there is Kutch. So there is a lot of opportunity there. So why this quest for power comes in between?
Good question. We should ask it to Mr. Khan, since his boss was the Chief Minister of Gujarat for 12 years. Made an effort bringing in Amitabh Bachchan, among others, as brand ambassador, but it hasn't really worked because at the end of the day, you've got to do much more than just branding. As you said, the product also needs to match the branding, and that hasn't happened in a Gujarat. Why not?
No, Gujarat is a great product. Gujarat has been very well marketed. It's done a very good branding campaign, and Gujarat has enormously gained from that campaign. Gujarat has grown enormously. Nobody had heard of Gujarat earlier. It's enormously grown as a travel and tourism product. It's one of the rare few states in India which does good marketing and good branding, and it has done a lot in terms of improving the quality of experience on ground. So you've got to give credit to Gujarat for what it has done. But I think there are just two states which have an outstanding potential, to my mind, Karnataka and Madhya Pradesh. These are two states which can be the world beater in tourism. And they have the enormous potential of creating massive number of jobs through travel and tourism.
But again, then the problem is these are both very large states. I mean, they are the size, larger than most small European countries. Is that part of the problem, Craig, do you believe, or is that a strength that we have? That because we are so large, we wait for we don't have the, small is beautiful. The smaller states, Switzerland was completely committed to the idea of tourism. Here we wait for the next state to do it. Kerala waits, Karnataka, waits for Kerala to do it. We are not proactive enough because we are simply large and lumbering. Is that part of the problem?
I think you're trying to make everybody happy. And so I think the government at times is trying to, and they're worried about, what if the people up here say you're not thinking about us? And you have to just start with 5. And if you start with five, and you show that they're successful, then other states are going to award, and they have to be states that are friendly. And you could say, well, is it do they have to match the present federal government? Probably not, because you've seen in the case that Kerala has done very well. Kerala needs to be on that list of 5. Goa needs to be on the list of 5. You don't have to reinvent something. You take something that's great and make it bigger. So Goa is a great example of that. You get 2 airports. You work, and it's not just airports. It's infrastructure. It's cutting out the 180 permits to build 1 hotel. Nowhere in the world does that happen. And we've got to go back and say, how do you cut? If you
180 permits to build 1 hotel in Goa?
To build 1 hotel anywhere in India. And so how do you cut that out? Think of the time value of money. It takes 2 years to build a hotel in Japan, and they will tell you the date it's going to open, and it opens on that day. It takes us an average of 7 years to open a 5-star hotel in India. And why? That capital sits there unused with no returns for 7 years. It becomes expensive, the risk is high, and so there's so much more that needs to be done besides the airports. And so we can talk till we're blue in the face about making everybody happy. Let's experiment. Take 5 places.
Let's get more questions. Yes, sir. Do you have a mic, please? Yes.
Thank you. I'm Sudhir. Is smart city a missed opportunity from tourism perspective, or is it still an opportunity? Because smart city is a new project which has come up. So is it a missed opportunity, or is it still an opportunity?
No, I think it's too early. Infrastructure is getting done. So I think we'll have to wait for a while on this.
I don't think that people want to visit. They want to visit something that's unique and different. A city, just a city as a city, whether it's smart or not, really isn't different from anywhere else in the world. What's your competitive advantage as a country? No one else has the mountains you have, the safaris you have. You think of what makes you different, like a company. What's your competitive advantage? I think you said.
No, but we have a Himalayan state like Uttarakhand, which at the moment has only 1 airport in Dehradun. If I want to go to Nainital, I have to drive all the way from here. I mean, let's get real about where we stand at the end of the day. Himachal Pradesh, what beautiful state again. I want to go to Lahaul Spiti, right at the top, and experience one of the most unknown parts of the world. How do I get there? Through terrible roads.
No, Rajdeep, you are at your pessimistic best.
I'm very clear. I'm very clear. Journalists have to have the glass half empty so that we cannot allow you to get away by constantly telling us all is well.
No. You see, when I was in the world of tourism, the biggest complaint was that it was impossible to get a visa. A visa has been made so simple. Electronic visa, it's so easy to get a visa.
Congratulations, huh?
Yeah, India has made a radical turnaround.
Sure, e-visas have been terrific.
Okay, when I was in tourism, there were no airports. India has made the finest airports. Mumbai, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Delhi, all great airports we have now. When I was in tourism, there were no hotels. India's got the finest hotels. I mean, Marriott, 100 hotels, all the top hotels we have. I think we just need to get a few things right. And secondly, let me tell you, you're talking about Lahaul Spiti, you're talking about something. The beauty of these destinations is the lack of accessibility. I mean, the uniqueness, I'm telling you, it's very important to understand this. The uniqueness of some of these products is that don't cramp them with mass tourism. It's important.
That's an interesting point.
High unit value realization, and that's the first point I made. Indians are all the time talking 20 million numbers. Don't focus on value, not the numbers. Several destinations across the world have been destroyed by mass tourism. Cultures have been invaded, and therefore it's very important that whatever we do it with sensitivity, we do it with sustainability, we focus on value, we focus on high value tourism. That's why Kerala came across a winner. Focus on the upmarket tourism. The middle class is always aspirational in character. It will ape the rest.
Interesting you put that. And let me plug my book which is coming, which is pre-ordered today on Amazon, since you mentioned about how India has changed. It's called Democracy's Leaven, and the Australian cricketers who came to India in 1958-59 wanted to walk out of a Kanpur hotel because they said that the mosquito net had holes in it, and one of their players was bitten by a mosquito, and they refused to play that. They almost refused to play the test match in 59. I don't think that'll ever happen again.
But don't worry, I'll buy your book irrespective of your plugin.
Wonderful. But it's out today. It's out today, pre-ordered on Amazon. But look, the point made there, this whole idea of mass tourism. Goa is a good example. Many Goans feel that their culture is being destroyed by tourists coming in. At the same time, there's pressure on jobs to provide young Goans jobs, because apart from mining, Goa has very little else, and mining is now caught in an entire environmental debate. So how far do you go with tourism? Do you believe that's a debate worth having, that you need to keep certain parts of the country inaccessible, and the inaccessibility increases the attractiveness of the Himalayan towns, for example?
I'm not sure whether the answer is to keep it inaccessible, because the example that he mentioned also, Kerala has continued to retain its culture and traditions. In fact, it brought that back to the forefront, and that made tourism actually burgeon and flourish there. So how do you bring about that model in other parts as well? I mean, absolutely right. Northeast is a fantastic virgin territory. I mean, almost 70 to 80% is under forest coverage. Only one national park is known by most people, which is Kaziranga. There are 16 more, right? So is the answer that lock it down, do not let anybody know? I mean, the very few people who come to know will, go through.
And would you drive it through domestic tourism? Would you drive a place like Northeast initially through domestic tourism, create a buzz around it, and then get the foreign tourists to come in?
Absolutely, because what he talked about the Guwahati airport and opening up, when we saw the Bangalore to Guwahati flight, the direct flights, is immediate spike in demand to actually go to Assam, because that was the gateway to access the rest of Northeast. I mean, it's a given that to access the rest of Northeast, you have to travel by road, and actually your cab transportation is going to be more expensive than stays there. You stay at places which are under $1,000. That's the only stay infrastructure that is there.
So what's the difficulty? Where's the roadblock, for example, in dealing with this? Is it that you have actually 7 state governments that you've got to work with? Has the time come, in a sense, at least when it comes to tourism, to have maybe a unified tourism council for the Northeast, where all these sort of 7 states perhaps work together? And that could, apply to other parts of the country as you talk of these special tourism zones.
No, I think, we should just stop talking about this and start doing something. We should pick these 5 places, 10 places, find a local champion in a state chief minister, and make sure that we execute in a time-bound manner a specific plan.
Have you seen any state chief minister who has emerged as this kind of a champion for local tourism in all these years, someone who has embraced the idea and really taken it to another level? I'm trying to think of any one individual. Yes, we get all these full-page ads in papers from time to time, but I haven't seen anyone who's made tourism his number one agenda.
I think that's a failure of the private sector in part. We have not been able to make the case right. Every time you speak to a chief minister and you speak about connectivity, about airports, about tourism, there is a great deal of interest. I think you need to ensure that interest gets converted into a real plan of action, and pick the 5 most enthusiastic guys and just go and do it in their states.
I'm just wondering whether the smaller states in a way are better equipped to do that. Because, the larger states have far too many competing pulls and pressures. It's the small states that we need. So you mentioned Madhya Pradesh. The fact is, this is a huge, large state. Tough to get.
But great products.
Great products, but I'm just wondering whether micromanagement is a better way. Is that the global experience that you've had, Craig, that the smaller countries, I'm looking at Spain's figures, for example, remarkable figures of how Spain has grown. Portugal is growing now remarkably as a safe destination of Europe. Croatia, the smaller countries seem to be far more effective than the lumbering elephants, if I may call it.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's small or large. I just think it's the countries that the government puts tourism as a priority and sees it as a way to create jobs and to move people through the social economic mobility ladder. I mean, it's a chance for people to come in and be trained as a housekeeper, eventually become a housekeeping manager, and kind of move up in their wealth the same way. I mean, they see it as an export. They're out promoting it. And it's not just a tagline. It can't just be marketing for a country. It's got to be something that's carried all the way through. And it's got to be something that you make easy. So I'll give you an example. We were dealing with Colombia. Colombia has a kind of like an Invest Colombia arm. They went and they walked side by investors on building hotels. They cut the amount of time that I think it cut it down to 25% of what it was before to build a hotel because of permits. They walked you all the way through it. Because the government themselves says, listen, we're not just going to talk about this. We're going to actually execute it and make sure that it works.
And that's not happening here. You still have the 183 permits.
180, 185
What happened to the
permits.
Prime Minister? Sorry to sound pessimistic again.
No.
What happened
that
to
isn't-
ease of doing business?
But that isn't just on the federal level. That's the city, state, that's everybody
Sure.
jumping in, and it doesn't save the country. It doesn't save the country. What it creates is more opportunity for people to do things that are wrong, ask for money. That's why it slows the whole process down.
What happened to ease of doing business, Mr.
So
Khan?
Rajdeep, don't simplify it to this.
He's got
level.
183
I'll tell
permits.
you, I think we must get this right. You see, construction of any issue in India, in municipal areas, has been a complex issue for long in India. Simply because municipalities take a long time. It's ridden with corruptions, and I think we need to get. It's not just with hotels. It's including building your own house. This is a very, very complex issue, and the attempt by the Ministry of Urban Development has been to put everything online, ensure that you get it within defined time frames, and I think a lot of work is being done on that. And I think we need to get that hotels right. But I think there's another issue with hotels, and that is that the size and scale of hotels in India, especially in urban municipal areas, if you go to Singapore, for instance, there's no hotel with less than 500 rooms. So the ability to give higher FARs and to hotels and FSI is enormous. I mean, they believe that you must go vertical, even in limited space, you must go vertical, build much more, so that you can, it becomes a viable commercial proposition. And for hospitality purposes, they provide a higher FAR. And I think in urban areas, we need to do that and consciously do that. Because, you may not be able to provide land free of cost, which in many places it may be required because hospitality has a multiplier impact. But allow higher FAR and FSI to move up. But I wanted to come back to just come back to the Northeast. And in my mind, to my mind, it's one of India's unique products, and it's very important that we focus on. You want to create a tourism product, go back to its roots, focus on its local culture, focus on its local cuisine, focus on its local art forms. And it's not a 1,000 rupee destination. It's a $1,000 per night destination. Nowhere in the world do you have a product like Northeast. It'll get you $1,000 as long as
Driven by foreign tourists, you're saying, not necessarily by domestic tourism.
Because
this is the big challenge. In Goa, for example, increasingly it's the charters that come in. It's become, instead of raising the bar, Goa has now become about lowering the bar.
Since my whole experience has been about making Kerala move away from charters, from low value to high value destination, it's important that we understand that Northeast is about its uniqueness. And therefore, please, for God's sake, don't convert Northeast into a mass tourism destination. It has limited carrying capacity. It has the possibility of great sustainability. It has character and culture which can get you $1,000 a night. And that's the only way Northeast must grow and expand.
Okay, let me get in. Is there another question from anyone? Yes, ma'am. Why don't you take the mic?
Hi, I am Aditi. I think Vishnu can answer my question. I think Rajdeep touched it upon a little. That is the debate of whether the locals are ready to have tourists at their places. Because I was recently in Puducherry and I'm really sorry to say that I did not feel welcomed at all.
Really?
Yeah, so...
That's very strange.
That is, and it was very different than what I'd read on the internet. So when we are talking of getting into the remote areas, are the locals really ready? Because I feel that it might damage their cultures, their traditions a little.
Vinay?
So maybe how do you deal with it is my question.
So this problem is present and paramount. It's again referring to the Kerala example. That's the state which has the maximum number of homestays. Unfortunately, the rest of the nation has not imbibed lessons from Kerala and brought up great homestays with fantastic, engaging hosts who will make you feel welcome into their homes. So that's some basic level of etiquette training. How do you deal with travelers? How do you communicate with them? You know, be able to speak in English or whatever language that the tourist is comfortable in.
So literacy has made a huge difference in the context of Kerala,
Definitely.
which perhaps is another reason why UP, Bihar and parts of North India got left behind in the tourism sector.
Definitely, and it's truly embraced the, Aditi Devo Bhava concept as well, because from a host perspective, they'll go out of their way to make sure that the guest is feeling comfortable.
You know, we just have a couple of minutes, so I'll give you final comments. If there was one big change that you'd like to see come tomorrow, which you believe will be the kind of, which will dramatically transform tourism and travel, what would that be, Ajay?
I think that there needs to be a mindset change. You have to stop thinking in socialistic terms. You have to look upon connectivity, aviation, tourism as force multipliers. And you have to stop talking and get cracking with some real action.
You know, that's, of course, the perennial challenge in this country. Craig, if there's one thing that you'd like to see happen tomorrow?
I would have said what he said, but what I'd say today is cut red tape. Cut it in half. Make it a goal. If it takes so many permits to do anything, make it a goal to cut it in half.
Do you still have to come to Delhi more often than you would like, even if you're building in a state, or has power completely shifted to state capitals?
No, it's not. It's not all. It's every level. It's municipal governments. It's everybody. But the problem is, it's just become. It's so complicated. There's probably the two most complicated. I've lived in 13 countries. I've worked in over 60, and the two countries that always come to mind for is India and Brazil were the ones that became the most socialist of countries. But they became, it's the hardest place to do business. There's so many. And it doesn't keep corruption out. It actually creates more corruption.
Okay, so cut the red tape very quickly, Vinay.
Discussed this earlier as well. Zero in on a few locations, maybe 5 locations, and refresh brand India, utilizing products from those destinations.
Okay, great. We've got one big idea, certainly. 5 destinations is what we are looking at. I'm going to give you the final word. Amitabh, when you go back tomorrow or this afternoon to the Niti Aayog office, will you make a phone call to a Keralite, Mr. Alphonse, and what would you tell him? What would you tell the Tourism Minister of India if there's one piece of advice you want to give him today?
We just focus on 5 states, 5 circuits, 5 destinations, make them world class, and then go massively for Incredible India 2.0, because India is badly under-marketed, under-promoted. But create the product, create great world-class product, and then do this brand marketing.
Wonderful. That's a great way to end this morning, because we're going to look at this. We're looking for the big 5. You've got to identify those 5 and then just relentlessly focus on them. Give them all a very big hand. We've had a wonderful morning discussing travel and tourism. Thanks for watching.
Great.
Thank you.